Today, when we look at a map of the Middle East, we see two nations locked in a cold and dangerous struggle. Their leaders speak of war and destruction. It feels like they have been enemies since the beginning of time. But maps only tell us the present. If we look back 70 years, the picture changes completely. These two countries were not fighting. They were shaking hands and building a future together. The story of Iran and Israel is one of the strangest in history. It is a story of how the best of friends became the worst of enemies. In the middle of the 20th century, the world was a very different place. Both nations were young and felt alone in a region that did not always welcome them. Because of this shared feeling, they decided to look toward each other for support. During the 1950s and 60s, the relationship was strong and productive. Iran was one of the first countries with a Muslim majority to recognize the State of Israel. This was a bold move that shocked many neighbors. For the leaders in Tehran, it was not about religion. It was about power, security, and the simple fact that they both needed partners to survive in a difficult neighborhood. In those days, Tehran and Tel Aviv were connected by a bridge of cooperation. It was a golden age that many people have forgotten today. Israeli experts traveled to Iran to help with farming and water projects. They shared their knowledge on how to grow food in the dry desert. At the same time, Iranian oil flowed to Israel to keep their lights on and their factories running. The two countries even worked together on secret military projects. They felt that as long as they stood together, they were safe from the bigger threats around them. There were direct flights between their capital cities, and businessmen moved freely between the two lands. It was a partnership built on a common goal, to be strong, modern, and successful. But under the surface, the world was starting to change. History often takes us on paths we do not expect. As we dive deeper into this story, we want to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Sharing these stories helps us understand the world better. If you find these narratives important, please subscribe and join our community. Your support allows us to keep exploring the complex events that shape our lives and our shared history. To understand why they were friends, we must look at what historians call the periphery doctrine. This is a fancy name. For a simple idea, if the people right next to you are not your friends, find friends who live a bit further away. Israel and Iran were both on the edges of the Arab world. This made them natural partners. They believed that by helping each other, they could balance the power in the region. The king of Iran, known as the Shah, was a man who wanted his country to be a global power. He saw Israel as a door to the West. He believed that by being close to Israel, he would also be close to the United States. This gave him access to the best technology and weapons. For the Shah, Israel was a tool for progress and a shield against his enemies. Life for ordinary people during this time felt stable. There were thousands of Jews living in Iran who felt safe and respected. They were part of the culture and the economy. They were the human bridge between the two nations. It seemed like this peace would last forever. But the peace was built on the power of one man, and the people of Iran were becoming restless. The problem with a friendship built only on politics is that it can break when the politics change. While the Shah was happy with his alliance, many of his people felt differently. They saw the suffering of others in the region and felt that Iran was on the wrong side. They started to listen to new voices that spoke of religion and revolution. These voices described the relationship with Israel as a mistake. By the late 1970s, the streets of Tehran were no longer calm. The king was losing his grip on the country. People were tired of his secret police and his focus on the West. They wanted something that felt more local and more traditional. The friendship with Israel, once a source of strength for the king, became a symbol of everything the protesters hated about his rule. Nothing stays the same in history. The partnership that had lasted for decades was about to face a storm it could not survive. In 1979, the world watched as a revolution began. This was not just a change in government, it was a change in the soul of a nation. As the old flags came down, the relationship between these two former friends was about to go up in flames. The revolution of 1979 changed everything in an instant. The king was forced to leave his palace and fly into exile. In his place, a religious leader named Ayatollah Khomeini returned to a hero's welcome. He did not care about the old alliances or the secret deals of the past. He had a vision of a new Islamic Republic, and in that vision, Israel had no place at all. Almost overnight, the language used in Tehran shifted from diplomacy to anger. The new leaders called Israel the Little Satan. They argued that the land belonged to others and that Iran had a religious duty to fight against it. This was a massive shock to the world. A country that had been a quiet partner was now the loudest voice of opposition in the entire Middle East. The visual changes were just as dramatic as the words. The Israeli embassy in Tehran, once a place of busy meetings and cooperation, was quickly closed. The building was handed over to the leaders of the Palestinian movement. This was a powerful message to the world. The bridge was broken, the friendship was dead, and a new era of conflict had officially begun. For the people in Israel, this was a terrifying moment. They had lost their most important ally in the region. They watched the television news and saw thousands of people in Tehran shouting against them. They wondered if the peace they once knew was just a dream. The revolution was not just about Iran's internal politics, it was a threat to Israel's sense of safety in the world. Ideology is a powerful force. It can make people forget the benefits of the past. The new Iranian government believed that their survival depended on standing against the West and its allies. They wanted to lead the entire Muslim world, and to do that, they felt they had to be the strongest enemies of Israel. The conflict was no longer about borders, it was about ideas and faith. But history is never as simple as it looks on the news. Even when leaders shout at each other in public, they sometimes have to deal with each other in private. This is the great paradox of the 1980s. While the world saw two enemies, there were still secrets being kept in the dark. A new war was coming that would force these rivals to think about survival over their beliefs. In 1980, Iraq invaded Iran. This was a long and terrible war that lasted for 8 years. Iran was suddenly alone and under attack. Most of the world's big powers were supporting Iraq. Iran was desperate for weapons, spare parts for their planes, and ammunition. They needed someone who could help them, and they needed it quickly. This desperation led to a very strange situation. Israel looked at the war and saw a difficult choice. They did not like the new government in Iran, but they were even more afraid of the leader of Iraq, Saddam Hussein. They felt that if Iraq won the war, it would become too powerful. This led to the old rule of politics: the enemy of my enemy is my friend, even if only for a short time. So, a secret plan was created. Despite the angry speeches in Tehran, Iran began to buy military supplies from Israel. It sounds impossible, but it was true. Plane parts and weapons were sent through secret channels. Both sides needed something. Iran needed to defend its land, and Israel needed to make sure Iraq did not become the king of the Middle East. This period shows us how complicated human history can be. A soldier in the Iranian army might have been using a part for his tank that came from the very country his leaders told him to hate. These secret deals were not about friendship. They were about the cold reality of war. In a fight for life, people often reach for whatever hand is holding a weapon. However, these secrets could not stay hidden forever. Eventually, the news of these deals leaked to the public. It caused a massive scandal in the United States and around the world. But more importantly, it showed that the relationship between Iran and Israel was not just black and white. There were many shades of gray. But as the war with Iraq ended, those gray areas began to disappear. By the late 1980s, the situation was changing again. The war between Iran and Iraq finally stopped. Both countries were tired and broken. Iran no longer needed Israel's help to survive. Without a common enemy in Iraq, there was nothing left to keep the two rivals connected. The ideology of the revolution returned to the front of the stage, stronger and more aggressive than before. The 1990s marked a true turning point. The secret deals were over, and the public hatred became the daily reality. Iran began to look for ways to fight Israel without starting a direct war. They decided to use their influence and their money to support groups in other countries. This was the birth of a new kind of struggle, one that would be fought in the shadows and on the borders. The battlefield was no longer just a line on a map. It moved to a small country called Lebanon. In the early 1980s, Lebanon was suffering through a civil war. It was a place of chaos and pain. Iran saw an opportunity there. They wanted to export their revolution and find a way to reach the borders of Israel. They began to support a group that would become famous worldwide, Hezbollah. Hezbollah was more than just a group of fighters. With Iran's help, they became a powerful social and political force. Iran provided them with money, training, and a clear goal. That goal was to fight the Israeli presence in Lebanon. For the first time, Iran had a way to hit its enemy directly without using its own army. This was the beginning of the proxy war. Israel found itself in a difficult position. They were fighting an enemy that was funded by a country far away. Every time they thought they had won a battle, more support would arrive from Tehran. The conflict became a cycle of violence that never seemed to end. It was no longer about two nations talking. It was about rockets, hidden bombs, and constant fear along the northern border. As the Soviet Union fell and the Cold War ended, the map of the world changed again. Many people hoped for a new era of peace. There were talks between Israel and its neighbors. Some thought that maybe the whole region could finally settle down. But Iran felt left out and threatened by these peace talks. They believed that if Israel made peace with its neighbors, Iran would be isolated. To stop this from happening, Iran increased its support for groups that opposed peace. The language from Tehran became even sharper. They began to host conferences and events that denied history and called for the end of the State of Israel. This made the conflict deeply personal and emotional for people on both sides. The chance for a simple political solution was slipping away every day. The 2000s brought a new and even more dangerous element to the story. Iran began to develop its nuclear technology. They told the world it was only for electricity and medicine. But Israel did not believe them. For the leaders in Israel, a nuclear weapon in the hands of a government that called for their destruction was a line that could never be crossed. The tension reached a boiling point. This fear changed the way Israel acted. They knew they could not wait for a war to start. They began a secret campaign to slow down Iran's progress. This was a war of the mind and the machine. It involved computer viruses, mysterious accidents at factories, and the quiet work of intelligence agents. It was a war that happened in the dark, far from the eyes of the public. One of the most famous moments in this secret war was the discovery of a computer virus called Stuxnet. It was a brilliant and terrifying piece of code. It was designed to get into Iran's nuclear machines and make them destroy themselves. It worked without anyone knowing. It was a sign that the conflict had moved into the digital world. No one was safe, not even deep underground. But Iran did not sit still. They learned from these attacks and built their own digital army. They began to target banks, businesses, and government offices in Israel and the West. The conflict was now happening on computer screens and in the fiber optic cables under the sea. It was a silent battle, but the damage was real, and the stakes were getting higher every year. The tension was not just in the digital world. In the streets of Tehran, scientists began to lose their lives. Men on motorcycles would attach bombs to their cars in broad daylight. Israel never said they did it, but everyone in the world knew who was responsible. It was a message. We know who you are, we know where you live, and we will stop you at any cost. These events created a culture of deep suspicion and fear. In Iran, the government became more protective and more aggressive. They arrested people they thought were spies. In Israel, the military stayed on high alert every single day. The two nations were like two boxers in a ring, waiting for the other to move. But the ring was the entire Middle East. Then came the war in Syria. This added more fuel to the fire. As Syria fell into chaos, Iran saw a chance to move its fighters and weapons even closer to Israel's border. They built bases and moved rockets into the country. Israel responded by sending its planes to bomb these bases. The shadow war was now coming out into the light, and the risk of a direct clash was growing. What makes this story so heavy is the feeling that there is no exit. Each side feels they are fighting for their very existence. For Iran, it is about pride, religion, and the survival of their system. For Israel, it is about the safety of their people and the memory of their history. When two sides believe they are fighting for their lives, it is very hard to find a middle ground. But let us pause and look at the people behind the headlines. Behind the tall walls and the angry speeches, there are millions of human beings. In Israel, there is a large community of people whose families came from Iran. They grew up with the sounds of Persian music and the smell of Persian food. They still carry a piece of Iran in their hearts, even if they can never go back. These people represent a different side of the story. They remember the times of friendship. They speak Farsi at home and tell their children stories about the beautiful gardens of Isfahan and the busy markets of Tehran. To them, Iran is not an enemy on a map. It is a lost home. They are the living proof that the culture of these two nations was once deeply connected. In Iran, too, there is a complicated history. Iran has one of the oldest Jewish communities in the world. Even after the revolution, some chose to stay. They live in a country that officially hates the state of Israel, yet they continue to practice their faith in their synagogues. It is a quiet and difficult life, but it reminds us that history is not just about what governments do. There is a deep respect for Persian culture in many parts of Israel. You can find Iranian films being shown and Iranian books being translated. Even in the middle of a conflict, the art and the ideas of the people find a way to cross the borders. It is as if the two cultures are trying to talk to each other, even while their leaders are shouting. We must ask ourselves, how did we get to a place where these connections mean so little? Why does the fire of conflict burn so much brighter than the light of shared history? The answer lies in the way power works. Sometimes, leaders find it easier to unite people against an enemy than to work for a complicated peace. Hatred can be a tool for control. As we look at the world today, the conflict has reached a new and scary stage. We see drones flying across the sky and missiles being launched from hundreds of miles away. The distance between the two countries no longer provides any safety. The technology of war has made the world smaller, but it has also made the danger much greater for everyone involved. The recent years have been some of the most tense in history. Every time there is a small incident, the whole world holds its breath. We worry that one mistake could lead to a massive war that no one can stop. This constant state of alert is exhausting for the people living in the region. They just want to live their lives, raise their families, and feel safe. It is important to remember that things were not always this way. If we can remember the past, maybe we can imagine a different future. History shows us that alliances can change and enemies can become friends again. It has happened before in many parts of the world. But for that to happen here, something deep and fundamental needs to shift in the minds of the leaders. The story of Iran and Israel is a lesson in how quickly the world can turn upside down. It shows us that peace is fragile and must be protected. It also shows us that once trust is broken, it takes a very long time to fix. The bridges that were built in the 1960s were destroyed in a few months, but 50 years later, they have not been rebuilt. Looking back, we see a path of missed opportunities. There were moments when things could have gone differently. There were times when the tension could have been lowered. But each time, fear and pride seemed to win the day. The weight of the past became too heavy for the present to carry. And so, the cycle of the shadow war continues. Power is a strange thing. It can make a nation feel strong, but it can also make it feel very alone. Both Iran and Israel are powerful in their own way, but they are both stuck in a struggle that costs them billions of dollars and many lives. This money could be used for schools, hospitals, and a better life for their citizens. Instead, it goes into the machines of war. As we move toward the end of our journey through this history, let us think about the lessons we have learned. We have seen how a revolution can change the world. We have seen how secret deals are made in the middle of a war. And we have seen how a new kind of war is being fought in the shadows of the digital age. It is a complex and often sad story. But history is still being written. Every day, new events happen that will be in the history books of the future. What will they say about our time? Will they say we were the ones who finally found a way to stop the fire? Or will they say we let it grow until it consumed everything? The choices made by leaders today will determine the life of millions tomorrow. The relationship between Iran and Israel is one of the most important stories of our modern world. It affects the price of the oil we use, the safety of the planes we fly in, and the peace of the entire planet. Even if you live thousands of miles away, this conflict touches your life in some way. Understanding it is the first step toward hoping for something better. We must also consider the role of other countries in this story. The United States, Russia, and many others have played a part. They have supported one side or the other, often for their own reasons. This has made the conflict even more difficult to solve. It is not just a fight between two nations, it is a global game of chess where the pieces are real people. In recent months, we have seen direct attacks that were once unthinkable. The shadow war is no longer in the shadows. When missiles fly from one country to another, the danger is no longer a theory. It is a reality. The world is watching closely, hoping that the situation does not spiral out of control. This is the most dangerous moment in the history of their rivalry. What does the future hold? It is impossible to say for sure, but we know that both nations are resilient. They have survived wars, revolutions, and sanctions. They have people who are smart, creative, and brave. If that energy could be used for cooperation instead of conflict, the entire Middle East would change in a single day. The potential for good is just as great as the potential for destruction. The atomic shadow is still there, hanging over every discussion. The talk of nuclear power is the ultimate source of fear. It is the reason why the conflict feels so existential. In a world with such weapons, there is no room for mistakes. This is why the diplomacy of the future will be the most important work of our time. We need thinkers, not just fighters. As we look at the ruins of the old friendship, we must ask if it can ever be restored. It seems impossible now. The wounds are too deep and the blood is too fresh. But history has a way of surprising us. Countries that fought for hundreds of years in Europe are now the best of friends. Change is always possible, even when it feels like a dream. The cultural history of these two nations is so rich and deep. They are both heirs to ancient civilizations that have given so much to the world in science, art, and philosophy. This shared heritage is a foundation that still exists beneath the conflict. It is a reminder that they have more in common than their current leaders would like to admit. They are both keepers of history. Let us remember the musicians who still play the old songs. Let us remember the poets who write about peace even when it is dangerous to do so. These are the voices that will eventually lead the way. Governments may change, and ideologies may fade, but the human spirit and the shared culture of the region will remain long after the current leaders are gone. The story of Iran and Israel is a mirror of our modern world. It shows our greatest fears and our smallest hopes. It shows how we can build incredible things together and how easily we can tear them down. By looking into this mirror, we learn about ourselves and the kind of world we want to leave for the children of the future. It is a heavy responsibility. In the end, geography is destiny. Iran and Israel are part of the same part of the world. They cannot move away from each other. They will always be neighbors in some sense. They must find a way to exist in the same space without destroying it. This is the great challenge of the 21st century. It is a challenge that requires more than just weapons. It requires wisdom. It requires wisdom. We have traveled from the handshakes of the 1950s to the missile launches of today. We have seen the rise of kings and the birth of revolutions. We have explored the secret deals of the 1980s and the digital wars of the 2000s. It is a long and winding road. Each turn has brought new challenges and new lessons for us to learn about the nature of power. The mindset of conflict is something that can be very hard to change. Once a nation sees another as an enemy, everything they do is viewed with suspicion. Even a gesture of peace can look like a trick. Breaking this cycle is the hardest task in politics. It requires people who are willing to take risks for the sake of a better future, even when it is unpopular. As we conclude, think about the power of storytelling. By sharing this history, we keep the memory of the past alive. We remind ourselves that things were not always like this, and they do not have to be like this forever. Knowledge is a tool that can help us see past the anger and the headlines. It allows us to see the human reality of a complex world. Every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. We are currently in a very difficult middle for the story of Iran and Israel. But the end has not been written yet. We all have a small part in how the global story unfolds by choosing to understand rather than just to judge. The more we know, the better prepared we are for whatever comes next. The weight of the current stalemate is felt by everyone. From the halls of the United Nations to the small coffee shops in Tehran and Tel Aviv, people are talking. They are wondering if there is a way out. The status quo is dangerous, but the path to change is scary. It takes great courage to be the first one to lower the sword and speak a different language. We must also consider the impact on the environment and the land itself. The Middle East is a place of great beauty and history, but war scars the earth as much as it scars the people. The resources spent on fighting could be used to solve the problems of water and heat that affect everyone in the region. The earth does not care about our political borders or our religions. The cultural history of these two nations is so rich and deep. They are both heirs to ancient civilizations that have given so much to the world in science, art, and philosophy. This shared heritage is a foundation that still exists beneath the conflict. It is a reminder that they have more in common than their current leaders would like to admit. They are both keepers of history. Reflecting on the journey, we see how easily a friend can become a ghost. The memory of the 1960s feels like a ghost story now, something people talk about but no longer see. But ghosts can sometimes be brought back to life. It starts with the recognition of common humanity. It starts with the simple idea that the person on the other side of the border is just like you. The story of the Iran-Israel conflict is not just about the past. It is about what we value today. It asks us if we believe in the power of walls or the power of bridges. It asks us if we are defined by who we hate or by what we want to build. These are big questions that don't have easy answers, but they are the questions that define our age. In the silence between the explosions, there is still hope. It is a small and quiet hope, but it is there. It is found in the families who refuse to hate. It is found in the doctors who help anyone who is hurting. It is found in the people who believe that their children deserve a world where they can sleep without fear. That hope is the most powerful weapon of all. As we look at the final pages of our history today, we see a region at a crossroads. One path leads to more of the same, more tension, more fear, and more loss. The other path is unknown and difficult, but it leads toward a different kind of life. History is the study of choices. The choices we make now will be the history of tomorrow. The lasting impact of this conflict will be felt for generations. But we should never think that anything is permanent. The world is always moving and changing. The strongest walls eventually crumble, and the coldest winters eventually turn into spring. Our task is to stay informed, stay compassionate, and never lose sight of the people behind the politics. They are what matters most. Thank you for joining us on this long and complex journey through the decades. By listening, you've taken the time to look deeper into one of the world's most difficult stories. Understanding the past is the only way to make sense of the present. We hope this story has given you a new perspective on the events that shape our modern world and the people who live within them. We end our story today not with an answer, but with a hope. A hope that the next chapter of this history will be written with a different ink. A hope that the people of Iran and Israel will one day find a way to see each other, not through the sights of a weapon, but through the eyes of a neighbor. Until then, the story continues, and the world waits.